Okay, so let's go to the home screen. I'm in the CalPADS test environment. There's not a lot of traffic, and I would like to say it's going to operate faster than production, but that'd probably be a lie. It's just as slow as production at times. The one thing about the test environment is it prevents us from running into real student data so we can maintain students' privacy as we do demonstrations. But sometimes there's anomalies because this is where our developers implement the new stuff before it's in production. So we may see some things that look a little bit different that are coming in the future. And I'll try to point them out. And so Anna Saren was asking about the account, right? So you can see here it says activate your Entra account. I haven't done that yet because it doesn't work. Some people have tried with CDE and CSIS and they've said that it restricted their access. So the developers are trying to work on the new security model. And so that is why we're going to have different accounts. It has to do with this Entra. I think that's the security provider for CalPads in the future. I think we'll change the name. It won't be Entra account. It might not have a name. It might just be your account because we all have to change. But that's one of the things you're going to see that you're not familiar with in today's demonstration. So ignoring that, the first step when you're submitting your files to CalPads, right, is to verify the potential data matches. So you want to go to student data, and then you want to access the match tool. And I'll say this several times. I'm using the state account, which gives me access to every district. You'll see that here. So you don't ever have to select your reporting LEA, whereas I will. And then we just upload a file, right? And I've done it a few times, but I just want to make sure that we simulate the process. All right, so here's my file. It's just a SENR file with students who have demographic records and no SSIDs, right? These are all the students that I need to see if I can identify if they've been previously enrolled in California. These would be potentially preschool students, kindergarten students. They could be any grade level, right? Because they could have transferred in from out of state or out of country. The big thing is we don't want to take for granted that our kindergarteners, our TK students, and our preschool students hadn't been enrolled previously. So it doesn't hurt to run their demographics through the match file. Students can be reported as early as preschool, even if they're not students with disabilities. So that's one reason why I want to include them. And then, of course, I want to look at my results. Oops. Yep. So click apply filter to look at my results. So here you can see my submission. We don't want to wait on it. So I'll just look at what I uploaded when Adriana was presenting. You see the timestamp here. And so this match file, once you download it, is intended to go directly into your student information system, right? We'll review the contents of the match file so you can be familiar with it, but your student information system should be able to take this match file, import it, and give you a screen where you can go through your match results. So there's two things, right? All this data is in a single column and it's caret delimited. This little triangle right here is called the caret. If you select shift and number 6, that's how you would type it using your keyboard. And so, and although it looks like they're individual columns, all this data is in a single column. And so if I spread out column A, you can see that, right? So I just want to highlight column A. And then I go to data and I can click text to columns. And there's a wizard. This is the import wizard. And I can go through the steps to format this data. Well, I guess I can show you. I don't particularly like this though, but I can click next. You can see that the delimiter is the caret. If it's not selected, like sometimes it's you open your wizards like this. you set your delimiter, right? And so you can see that in here, they were separated into columns. So let's do that again. See, this is the way the data looks now, all in a single column. And then when we set our delimiter, you can see the data is divided and separated appropriately. Then you click next. And this is important to change it to text if you might be submitting this data back into CalPads, right? And what that's going to do is it just treats every character as a character. It doesn't try to make your list of numbers a numeric value. It doesn't apply logic. So some independently reported charter schools have a school code that begins with a 0, right? 0 before your numbers isn't logical in the real world. And when you have it in general, it will take that out. And that's not what you want because it's really a code. It's a code of different characters. And so we just go to text and it leaves the data as it's intended. And well, one, you should slide this all the way to the right first. Shift and then click this last cell and make sure that every column is highlighted. Then you go to text. And you can see that the format changed at the top. So you can see general here and then text. And that's all you have to do. Click finish and voila, all your data is sorted. If you want to make it a little bit easier to view, you can do wrap text so you can see the column titles. And this is what the match results file looks like, right? This is the record that we submitted on the left, the student's name, the local ID, and then we see the results, right? In the middle, we have the result category, tells us it's a single match. That means CalPads found only one SSID that matched the demographics submitted. It tells us there's a multiple match, so a single student has multiple matches, or there's no match. This student has no one matches the student's demographics. And then there's a match score. This may vary, right? And the greater the number, the more closely the match. So here you can see the match score. And then on the other side of column K, right, are the results. And so you can see the student data in the results file. And your student information system will have a better screen for your analysis and comparison. But the point is, you're supposed to look at these details and identify if your student demographics have a match. So often, if they're going to be multiple match, right, those are the ones you really want to pay attention to because there's multiple candidates. You want to see the characteristics of the student. So that's the demographic file. And you can see down here, we have parent names. That helps us a lot. Sometimes addresses, English language statuses, because the birthday, the name is probably going to match between the students. That's why we have multiple matches. So you want to look at other demographic factors, where the student was born. Those are usually things that help. And then you want to select the match, right? If you want to, in your student information system, populate your SIS, whether it's Power School, Aries, Infinite Campus, what have you, Q, you want to populate the SSID for that student, right? Close this. And before we go to the next step, I do want to show you all. So we have a video on the SSID enrollment. So the match tool video will walk you through the match tool. It's a whole video. You can see module A, module C. There's a whole video on the match tool. I think this is in CalPads Basics as well. CalPads Basics. So a more extensive description function. So here's the match tool whole playlist. And then if you're a little bit shaky on just uploading files, there's a batch file submission, right? So just wanted to point you there. And then after you make your matches in CalPads, you should be ready to upload your SENR file. And so let's see if I have that open. I want to look at it. Here's what the data would look like in file format. You'd have a CSV file or caret delimited file, but these are students that would have matched their SSID, right? We found some students and we matched their SSID. And then these 3 students don't have SSIDs. And we're going to submit these records from our student information system into CalPad. And that will assign these 3 students SSIDs and create their enrollment record. For these students, we're going to create the enrollment record. The match file extracts data from CalPads. It does not submit any data. So when you submit a student enrollment file into the match file, its sole purpose is to match SSIDs for you. It's to find potential matches. It will never submit data. So there is no harm that could happen. You could be subject to errors if the data is not formatted right or you're missing fields. So if your students don't have local IDs or if they already have SSIDs in your file, the match file won't take it. Those are examples. However, it, generally speaking, it's a great tool. And it's what we always suggest that you use when you start your obtaining SSIDs for your students. You could never be sure if they were enrolled and the parents just didn't tell you or you don't see that when they transfer. So we always recommend starting there. So then once you have your SSIDs, you go to File Upload, right? And the first file you're going to submit to CalPads is the enrollment file. And then my second explanation for functionality that you're going to wonder about is this split file option. They're working on this as well. We wanted to include it in the fall, but it's not there. I've tested it and there's questions we can't answer, so we're not implementing it. Not to say that I influenced it at all, but Angela and the development team are working hand in hand. And this is intended to make files smaller for larger districts so they can go faster. It's ambitious, so it may not come soon. Anyway, for the functionality we do have and what we expect is for you to submit that enrollment file. So you just select your file. Here's my file and you upload it. And I can close it, I think, here at this point. So we're on the view submission screen. If you upload your file and you walk away, maybe you have to get coffee, get some donuts. If you're working from home, you got to tend to your little ones, what have you. You can always access the view submission screen from upload view submissions directly. Here's the link. But when you upload a file, it will send you here. And so you can see that our file posted, right? And so for those of you who are new, there's a view button. And you'll find that it's useless when your file posts because we don't let you see the records that post, right? So I just submitted 5 students, 2 of which had SSIDs, 3 didn't. How do I know or how would I find their SSIDs? Okay, you guys don't have to answer, I'll tell you. So there's always the extracts. So you can go to the extracts and you want the SSID extract. And you have 3 options, right? You have date range by post date range by enroll date range by SSID create date. So we'll make a couple extracts. And I'm just going to select all schools. I think I only had 2 schools in here. And I'm going to try to select SSIDs just created today. And you can select to be emailed when they are done. I'm not going to bother with that. And this shouldn't take long, right? So that's our first request. And then our second one is the option I prefer. And, I only do this for demo or when I'm troubleshooting. So you guys probably have better suggestions than me of how to extract SSIDs. And for whatever reason, I can't type in CSIS. And, I'm selecting all schools again. And I'm going to go by enrollment date. And so I want all the students that have enrolled this year. So I'm just going to pick the first date of the academic year and today's date. All right. I guess I'll just take the most recent enrollment and then. And so this is a two-step process. You first have to request and then retrieve your extracts. So while we wait for the extracts to process, see, extract request made successfully. Please check back for download later. We'll come back to this. Remember that we requested the extract. The other option we have is to look for the students using online maintenance. And I can go to search by demographics. The problem is you have to do this one by one. And so I had a student name, first name was Sauce, like Sauce Gardner, but instead soy sauce. And the student was male. We'll search. And because I only have 5 students, maybe this is a easier way for me to do it than requesting an extract. But if you're submitting, tens or hundreds or possibly thousands of students, there's no way you want to do this, right? It takes too long. So you can see we're 3 students here. And so I would have to make sure to find the student that I'm looking for. So it's probably this guy, 825, 2000 at my district, right? This is some other kid or something else. And this seems to be another kid. I don't know, 12th grade. So this is my guy right here. And then I can access their record, or I could have just took the SSID and populated into my student information system, right? But you can see how tedious that would be. So let's go back to the extracts. They should be done. But if you like have one student that came in or whatever, that's a way you can find the SSID. So both of my extracts are complete. So let's look at the first one, and you can see that there's one is 3.4 kilobytes and the other is 313 bytes. And so the create day test, just those SSIDs that were created today should come back in this extract, and you can see that it's going to be very small, right? There's not a lot of data. The date range produces a larger file, and we'll show why. So let's download this file. And then I want to go to the CALPADS user manual. CALPADS user manual. I don't want any shortcut. And then there's always extracts available, batch file templates. So here's the batch file templates. And for the SSID extract, it has its own template here. Now, the SSID extract also goes directly into your student information system. You don't have to make this step. I'm only doing this so that we can visualize the data, right? The extracts from CalPads are designed to go directly into your student information system. Okay. So here's this template. I'm going to enable editing. So I want to import the data into column 3. but we have a macro, right? And so here's my file explorer here. And let's first create date test. So you can see the 3 records, but we really can't visualize this data. It opened up in Notepad. It's again a caret delimited file. And so now when I open File Explorer, we should be able to see it. Create date test. And to use the macro, I have to click the file and then go to properties. And then I want to unblock, apply, and then OK. And so when we try to import it directly using this button, it should work. All right. We go to data, get data, legacy wizard, and I'm gonna go from text. Now, if you go to data and you don't have a legacy wizard, you can always go to file, options, data here, show legacy data import wizards. And I'm just doing from text. I'm not pulling it from any other sources, and then click OK. I've done that a long time ago. There's a video for that, of course, here. There's a full playlist of importing files into Excel templates. So if you see it here and you find a reason or you think you need to do it later, you can always do that. But the legacy wizard is always consistent. The macro is real easy if you can get it to work, but if you have restrictions, it won't. So I'm going to import from legacy. Now I'm just going to select the create date test, import. The file does not have headers, so I don't have to worry about that. It's delimited, right? Next. The caret's already selected, so it's broken up. If it wasn't, remember, we'll set our delimiter. That will partition the data. Then we drag this cursor all the way to the right, shift, text, finish, and then it's telling us cell A3, 3A or A3. So that's where we want our data to go. And if there's anything in the template, you could say overwrite. There's nothing there, and that's all you have to do. And so you can see that this is what it looks like. This is the data that we have. We scroll to the right. You can see the SSID create date is just those 3 SSIDs. And there's additional information that sometimes is useful if you needed, like if the student was a student with disability, it would tell us that. And we'll show that in the next file. And then you have the student's SSID. So I already have soy sauces. So I will just take this. And again, I don't have a student information system. So all I'm doing now is pasting this into my SCNR upload file. Again, this extract is used to import these SSIDs into your student information system. So, that's how I use the extract. It's always easier to become proficient using your student information system in CALPADS. You'd have to learn 2 systems, but it's so much easier. You keep the data consistent between the 2. So let's look at the other extract. We have the date range extract. Let me download that. And then we open the SSID extract template again. So I'm using the template again so we could look at the 2 different requests. So now I'm going to go with the good old standby data. Sometimes, the import button might work if you don't have this message. Microsoft has blocked macros. And you could Google how to resolve it. I always struggle with it, so I ignore it. And I just go to data, get data. I have my legacy wizard, and I'll be less explanatory this time and just get to it so you can see how fast it is. And, I generally import my data this way when I'm having to work with the template. So the difference is these are all the students that are arranged in that date range I selected. Whether they're enrolled already, whether the SSID was created 10 years ago, 5 years ago, whenever, these are all the students that I have enrolled currently that I've submitted maybe in this most recent SENR submission, or maybe I submitted it a couple days ago or what have you. It doesn't matter. These are all the students that are enrolled in CalPADS currently in my district. So I'm looking for those 3 new SSIDs, right? So if I go to data and I'll just select all and just select filter. So now I have a filter on all my columns and I can go to create date. And you can see that we filtered for the most recent, and those are the 3 that were created today. So I still have access to all those SSIDs as well as everyone else, right? So we can see all these SSIDs. Sometimes you can see if there's a discrepancy between the initial U.S. school enrollment. This is in the student information record, and this is the earliest enrollment in CalPAD. And so the earliest enrollment in CalPADS should not be before the initial U.S. school enrollment. And the reason for that is a student might have initial U.S. school enrollment in private school. They may have initial U.S. school enrollment out of state. And then their first time being reported in CalPADS as a public school student in California could be after, but it can't be before. If their initial U.S. school enrollment was in California and they were reported at CalPADS, these dates should mirror each other. And this is a TK through 12 date. So we're not looking at preschool, right? We're looking at grade level TK. When did they first enroll? And so this is an indication if you will have a potential error. Your students with disability indicator, you can, you know, if you want to use this to help identify those students with disabilities and give it to your SEDS data coordinator. So as students transfer, you don't get the SENR 0606 error, and they can adopt the IEP for the students. And then, their primary language, if you have TBDs, you can immediately, right here, you can immediately get those students identified for testing. So there are some uses to this extract for your incoming students. After you submit your SENR file and you verify your SSIDs and you upload them into your student information system, there is a step in between that you could take, right? And I think before requesting your SSID extract, you should go and check out your MIDs. And a MID is a multiple identifier, right? And so a single student has multiple SSIDs, or if there is the potential. And so we have 4 students enrolled. These 2 students I just submitted SSID requests for, and CalPADS is telling me the demographic data for this student is similar to another student. There might be 2 identifiers. Check your records. So I can open it. There's a training for this too. If you type in SSID anomalies or just anomalies in the CSIS training channel, and that is the last fall 1 training we have available. Kyron will be doing that. So we have the focus SSID. This is our record, and the matching SSID. In this case, there's potentially two matches. So there's another SSID I can compare. I can't compare them all against each other, but I could compare them one at a time to my data. So here's my data, and I'm looking at this data. So the enrollment information is not necessarily significant unless there's a CCE. What I want to look down here, and if there is a CCE, like you see, a concurrent enrollment exists. So it's telling me there's an overlapping enrollment. In the case of a CCE, I want to make sure it's not the same student, and that might require me to reach out to this district. So then we have a preview to help you. You see there's a warning, right? That's because there's a CCE. If this is the same student, there's two open enrollments for that student. There's the SINF, demographic information available. And if the parent guardian information, the race code was populated, that might give me a greater indication. Right now, it looks like it's the same student, right? The additional information would help me. If you can't rely on the student English language acquisition status, right? Depending on if the student home life, one parent might say the student speaks English, another parent might say, no, the student speaks Spanish. In truth, you might have a bilingual student. Both are correct. And depending on what you say is the home language, or depending if the LEA looks at the previous language, right? So there could be discrepancies in home language just on who's enrolling the student. And then, of course, there's indication if the student has an active IEP. So, you know, there's additional field. You can always take the SSIDs. Let's say this guy. And in CALPADS, look at the student's records, right? Now you can look at the entire demographic record, and it might reveal to you information to help you identify the student or to see if it's in fact the student you have. But you want to do your due diligence. So I would say check your mids before you make your SSID extract. So if you have mids, you can resolve them. Then when you request your SSIDs, you'll have the correct SSID. If you populate your student information system with a created SSID and then resolve the mid later, CalPads will update that record, but then you have to manually update your records. You also could run into problems with discrepant data. If a student has tested for EL, we can't delete that record. That comes from TOMS. So now you have to submit a data request. If you have duplicate enrollment dates, CalPads will throw you an error. Just a whole host of potential errors that are harder to deal with once you've assigned the SSID, and they're easier to resolve in the beginning. Right? At this point, we've resolved our mids. We've submitted our SSID extract back to our student information system. The student records are enrolled. We have them enrolled in CalPads. So now we have to submit our student information system. And I know we have multiple things, and CalPads is not our only priority. But if you can ever submit your enrollment records and post them, please submit your student information system very closely afterwards. CalPads creates placeholder records. It takes the information you submitted in your SENR file and will create this pseudo demographic record. And you can see that it's not complete. Until this is populated, these students aren't identified for testing, right? So if you're enrolling these students and you want them identified for CAS testing, they come in March, you have to submit the enrollment and the demographics. If you're enrolling students and you're trying to identify them for LPAC testing, you need the enrollment, the demographics, and the program record, right? So you want to make sure that you are, you allow time not just to submit the enrollment. The students enrolled, yes, but for matching direct certification is at the beginning of every month. You want to make sure that you get the demographics record in. And so while we're on that topic, Next month is October. October 1st is census day. I think we pull direct certification results in November as well. But you want to identify your students as many as possible for census day. So if you have students that transfer into your district in October, you want to be uploading this data completely on a tight time frame. So students come on September 30th, you're going to want to submit the enrollment, the demographics, and the CELA file. If you don't submit the program, it's not as detrimental, but you would want to submit the program as well. There is a time frame for identifying students with NSLP records. So there's a extra 30-day window for that. So it's not nearly as important, but for student English language acquisition, identifying EL students, you want to do that by census day. Let's go back to file upload. We've submitted our enrollment record. Now we want to submit our student information. Now, when you're comfortable, once you have ownership, information, or your CELA file, you can upload all of those at once if you like. Once you have posted your enrollment record. Just to keep things simple though, we'll just focus on the student information for now. And student information demo file. So here's our demographics record. It was rejected, so let's find out why. Missing residential address city name. So you go back into your student information system and populate the residential address city name. As far as troubleshooting, it looks like we didn't put any city names in the file. I have a record for all. This is showing me what I submitted. Remember that this is not posted to CALPADS. The record was rejected on submission, and so this did not get posted. So, I mean, I'm not looking in CALPADS for this. I'm looking at my student information system, the source of the data. So residential address city name. The error is SINF 0051. If this doesn't help me enough, that's just the name of the error, right? You want to click the error. This will automatically take us to the CALPADS user manual. We're in the troubleshooting section and we went specifically to this error. And it tells us if address line 1, state, province code, zip code is populated, then the city name must be populated. So if we include an address in our demographic records, it has to be a complete address. Remember, it tells us where to look in the CFS by numerical value. It's pretty straightforward, but if I wanted to look it up, I can come here. The error said we're missing the city name, so that's 2.33 city name. So we're going to go to 2, right? Here's the CFS, and I just want 2.33. So here it is, 2.33 residential address city name. The normal name of city of town where the mail is received, standardized left. The address does not have to be in all caps. The field must only contain alphanumeric numbers, so no special characters. And it tells us the condition of when it's required. So if I didn't know what data was expected for that field, the CFS would tell me. So here's my file, right? My file would be to you, your student information system. Your provider, your vendor would give you the documents to translate one field from CALPADS to your information system. So I think I have it populated here. Address line, nope, that's not the field I'm looking for, right? The city name. So somewhere in here it's supposed to say Berkeley. this field here. And I'm not simulating using Excel templates to suggest you guys should use Excel templates. Again, we don't have a student information system. So what we're trying to simulate is populating this data in your student information system. Then you extract the file again, and I have to make a completely new upload, right? And this process is iterative. You're going to resolve errors until your file passes. So you might make multiple submissions. And theoretically, when you get a submission with all your records and it passes, you move on to the next file. So don't get discouraged if you upload a file and there's errors. You don't get discouraged if you upload a file and there's hundreds or thousands of errors. We can work through it. A lot of times it's one field that might trigger on multiple records. One field can trigger multiple errors. So it's validating now. We'll just refresh. And now we can see that we resolved all 5 records and then posted. So rejected records, you can look at the rejected record so you can diagnose. Once the records post, there is no view. Remember, we looked and there's no information. So, this is part of the post redesign a while ago. They're not changing it. And so again, if you want to validate or verify that these records post, take an SSID that was in the file. Here's an SSID, copy. And then the SNF, the student information files provides the demographic record and the address record. So now you can see we have records for the student. So yeah, the file posted, everything is here. All right. And now let's move on to the next file, which let me close this. Wait, I don't want to close that yet. So we're going to upload students. Let's do SELA record. SELA. All right, so let me get my SSIDs copied over. And we're going to upload this file now. All right, so I have my SELA file. You can see that it was rejected. There's only 5 records, so how do we have 23 errors? Let's look at that. So we have required fields missing, values not found in the reference set, missing English language acquisition status start date. This whole file was a mess, right? So that's when you go to your student information system, look at the student's records, and identify. Now, what I think the problem, I don't know if I've used a template right? So the data looks complete. Well, there is no status start date, right? And then I have two record types not missing. How would I find that? So let's look at GER1, required field missing. The English language acquisition status code value TBD is not found in the reference set because TBD should be to be determined, right? So I have the wrong code. So this code here is incorrect. But what would be the reference set for this code? If I thought this was correct, well, let's walk through it. So that's GER2. Value not found in reference set. The value provided for the field is not valid in the CALPADS code set. So I would have to reference the code set. It's telling me to go to the code set, right? And then the file specification. So we have the code set here. Here are all the different language codes. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for English language acquisition statuses. So I'll just type in status. And I don't want all the different statuses in CalPads. I just want English language acquisition status. You can see all the codes are valid. There are no end dates. And so these are all the codes I can use. And so, I have to be shrewd enough and detailed enough to identify my typo, right? So I have to be determined. Now I have a valid code. So in my mind, that's resolved. I didn't have English language acquisition status start dates. So I'd have to look at their record and make sure I update that. Let me see. For this demonstration, I think I'll just use their enrollment start date if I could find it real quickly. So now every student has a status start date. And you use the error list to walk you through that as well. And then I have to have a record type code. I have to tell CalPads what validations to process. So I have to have a record type code. Right. So the data has to be completed in your student information system. Some systems, I know Aries, there's a button you can click that will highlight every file or every field that's required for CalPads. I think the other ones do that as well. And I save this file. I wonder if I have to close it or if I could just submit it as is. So a lot of times when you troubleshoot errors, it's going to send you to reference documentation. So you can't just rely on a single document for anything in CalPads. Unfortunately, even the user manual, you have to use the reference documentation. And being familiar with them enough to know what's in them is this, the skills you need, right? You have to be able to identify and know the data guide provides this type of information. The FAQs is likely to have this. The CFS is used for that. So you can quickly reference things. And when you're having trouble, you could submit a support ticket, but I'll tell you, I try to be detailed in my support, but I'm not the most responsive. So if anyone's emailing me right now, from the time I logged in this morning, I've been preparing for training. I'm doing training. I'm not responding until after lunch, most likely, right? Because this training will take me to lunch and I am going to eat, right? I didn't become a fat boy not eating. And so I am going to eat. And then at 1 o'clock, I might respond. But I do have a meeting at 1:30. So if I have multiple tickets or if I go into the queue, right, I'm not available. So it's always good to submit your tickets to the queue so any trainer, analyst, or service desk team could answer your question. But if you're my LEA and you submit me an email, I will respond. Just give me time. So I'm down to 2 rejected records now, right? It's kind of frustrating because I thought I fixed them all, but I'll just come here. Primary language must be equal to 00 English. So why does it say 00? That's for historical records or American Sign Language when status code equals EO. So I'm going to come back to my CELA file. And I really didn't intend for the demo to be this extensive. It's just my incompetence, right? Just fine. Here's the CELA file. So I'm not going to guess. These are the 3 records that trigger the error. Primary language code, English. The status must be 00. Right? That's what it's telling me. I have EO and ENG. I wonder. So here's something. Let's see here. So this is what I'm looking at, right? The status code, when status code is EO, the primary language code must be ENG. I wonder if I use capitals, is that the problem? No, this is the code. And I don't know, maybe it's case sensitive. So this is something I didn't plan for. But this, sometimes these are codes, remember. So they do have to be specific. EO, it seems logical. I'm going to try to upload again, right? So the process is iterative. And every time I'm going back to my spreadsheet and making corrections to make sure that I save. It simulates, the process you all would take going into your student information systems. So I just hit F5 to refresh. Finally, the record's posted. I was getting worried there. So that's a first for me. I didn't know the capitalization of the language codes would trigger an error, right? None of the characters changed. They were just capitalized. So that tells you how sensitive some of these codes can be. And I know that can be frustrating because I was starting to get frustrated. I could empathize with you all because CalPads is part of your job. All I got to do is this today, right? I'm going to do this and go to a meeting, and everything else I do, is what I determine to be a priority, right? I don't have overwhelming pressure at the moment. So this is what a record would look like. Now, what would happen if there was evidence that this student was TBD? How do I update that if The parents, right? Sometimes we're not trusting of all the services the government provides, including education, or we feel, I had a student, I have a son who is hard of hearing. He's an excellent student. He's in college now, but at one time, his mother wanted to test him for special ed because socially he wasn't with his peers, right? Reasonable when you can't hear him. But I was sensitive, right? Because I didn't want his education to be compromised because of his hearing. I wanted him to get as much education as he could, but also know when he grew up, at least for me as a parent, I felt like the world doesn't accommodate you. And I felt like he was a good enough student to overcome those challenges. He proved me right, which I like to be right, but that's, a feeling from a parent who may not necessarily want English language services, right, for their English learner or their bilingual child. So, what would you do if the parent submitted English and there's evidence of another language spoken, right? How would you correct that? Well, you can't simply, let's pick today's date, say, okay, the student is one, we can't submit EL or IFEP, right? The student has to be tested. So to be tested, we have to say to be determined. And then we have to identify, it can't be EO. Let's say the English language code was Spanish. I want to make sure we pick the letter code, not the numeric code. And we try to post this record. So let's see what would happen. And if you ever want to check a submission, this is telling us it has been submitted for processing. If you want to see the results, you can just drag this link into your web browser. Marshall taught me this trick. I can see that it was rejected. CELA 255, invalid change, right? And so we did have a slide that Adriana went over. And if we could go back to that slide, I have it here. And let's make it bigger. All right, there's a valid sequence. This is also in the user manual, right? We had a student that was EO, and we want them to be TBD. It can go, you follow the arrows. We can go from EO to TBD. However, we can't do that just by submitting a TBD record, right? We have to submit a correction reason code. And we started this process in online maintenance rather than submitting a file because correction reason codes can only be done in online maintenance. So if you have a out of sequence change, right? We're first going to do add a record. Again, English language acquisition status. We identify the student as of today should be TBD. We're putting the new code TBD, and then we have to say what the correction reason code is. But right now, I think only 1, 3, and 5 are valid. I think 2 was retired and 4 was retired, right? And so we're going to say evidence of non-English primary language. This could be perhaps the input was wrong. And this will allow us to go from EO to TBD. Also, the date has to be after the EO date. And then SPA, right? And this is one way to do it. EO records can also be deleted, right? We could have deleted this record and replaced it, right? If this was indeed an error, it's the first day of school hasn't started yet, we could actually open this record and delete it and then replace it. But you can see with the correction reason code, now we show, the student was EO for a period of time. And this is important if the student wasn't receiving services. Then we identified. Now, from this point, once the student's TBD, they're going to show up as eligible for LPAC testing and TOMS. You have to get that student tested within 30 days, right? They're enrolled. They have a TBD record. For this particular student, the status date is 9/18. The clock starts now. It didn't start on the enrollment date. The problem you're going to have is you have to get this student tested and results back before census day. Because if this student is an English learner, they can be included on the LCFF counts if they're identified as an EL student, not TBD, by October 1st. All right, so that's what we got for the student English language acquisition. And now our last file coming from our student information system for fall 1 is the program file. All right. And let's see. Enrollment. Program template. I'm trying to find my program file. Here it is. Oh, I do have SSIDs for these guys. Oh, that's great. So here's my program file. I limited it to 2 students, the 2 that I had SSIDs for and I forgot. And let's upload it. Look at that. The program file is perfection. Woo! I didn't want another file to work through like that CELA file. We took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 iterations to get this submitted. And the program file went through nice and easy. If you all could be so lucky. So let's look at some of the records actually, though. And who has a program record? This guy does. So I'm just coming to this error to look at the record. So we've completed the student profile, right? That includes the enrollment. You can see the recent enrollment for the student here, their demographic record. You can see the demographic record here, the English language acquisition, and then the student program, right? So here are the programs the student has that we submitted recently. Not every student will have a program, but they may, right? And so this is selected by CALPADS now, right? It used to be a field we had to identify years ago, like maybe 10 years ago. It's automatic. It has no significance in the way we interact with the data, but an eligible program means that the membership is reported even if the student's not participating. Most Fall 1 programs, if not all, are eligibility programs. So you may not have GATE program at your school or at the school of enrollment for a student. However, if they are eligible for gifted and talented education, you should still report that program, right? Now, free meal program is a bit different. Students have to qualify for free meals for you to submit the program record, right? They need an NSLP application. They need an AIF if they're at a CEP school, or probably more important than an AIF now is that UBA application, right? The universal benefits application for the CEP students that don't automatically qualify through direct cert, free meal program record. Sometimes you have students that are directly certified. Other students of their household are not, right? So maybe there's a blended family. And, the family demographics, some students in the household are eligible for free reduced lunch, others aren't. Well, by law, it's the household, right? So if there's income eligible students in that household, the other students can be appropriated these program records, right? And so we went over the resources for CalPads, but they're extensive. So sometimes you have to go to CDE, right? And then so extending categorical eligibility, I've gone here many a time, so I kind of knew what to search. Again, if you have questions, you can ask them. We can refer you to the right person. But this is more of a nutrition thing, but these are FAQs about how to extend the eligibility or categorical eligibility. There's direct certification website, right? So if you need instructions about direct certification, the CD has a direct certification page. Oftentimes I reference this in our Q&As. You have your regulation, state level matching rules. These are what CalPAD used to identify these students. Local level matching verification, more. Um, one of these two has directions for extending eligibility. So this tells you which results, which can be extended and which cannot, right? So eligibility does not extend to household if the student is homeless, migrant, runaway, Head Start, or foster. If they receive these benefits, so if they're directly certified, they can be extended. Or if a student submits an NSLP application, right, that's income eligibility. If they're identified through the NSLP application as eligible, their siblings are as well. Always remember that it identifies the household. So, and there's a definition for household on this web portal. Can't remember exactly where, but we can help you with that if you needed the definition and you needed guidance for extending benefits. But you know, you want to remember with your 181s, the rules for assigning the program record, your 182s as well, and then identifying their students. So you should have a script. You should have the ability to query, or your student information system should be able to automatically process the rules. This is very important. When you have students that are eligible for the free meal program, that you are accounting for the members of their household and identifying whether or not they are eligible too. Not just, we know that students are going to receive free lunch because of the Universal Meals Program, but you want to generate funding for LCFF. And if they have the free meal program record, that's going to trigger LCFF. But also, extended benefits I think you might also, if you extend benefits, need a UBA, but that generates income for the families as well, right? And so if you're having a hard time getting this information completed, give the families the information on the Sunbucks, right? That it's some money over the summertime that your child might be eligible for if you just tell us, if you're income eligible or not, right? I mean, but there's that. Then we have this student. And part of data population is going to be soliciting the information, right? A lot of that is done by the student information system when the student enrolls. But we had a training one time. I think we went to a county office. Different LEAs are more effective because they're willing to campaign. The school district that my kids go to, I think all of us here except for Simon, me, myself, Marshall, Adriana, all our kids are in the same school district. And I don't know if Adriana has noticed it. Her kids are younger. Mine are kind of exiting out of the K through 12. They will solicit information when you don't give it up. They flood your email inbox. And that's the kind of harassment I respect, because when you don't certify, I do the same thing. I send you an email almost daily. And you be like, I hate this dude, Nate. I don't care. I need you to do what you need to do. So that's how my school district is. That's probably where I learned it from. We are telemarketers here at CSIS. Please submit your files. All right, so here's the homeless program. And Slyman taught me this a long time ago when he used to I have to train. I worked on the service desk. These conditional validations, he always points them out, or he used to when he trained. Sometimes I forget. But depending on your program type code, there are other fields that are conditionally validated, right? So when you use program 191 in your record, you also have to tell us the homeless dwelling type, right? You have to type in that code and CalPads will identify it. You also have to populate the unaccompanied youth indicator, yes or no, only for program 191. These are conditional fields of validation. If we were to report a different record, so I don't, what school is this kid going? High school? Let's say it's a 122 record. You don't see 122s in Fall 1 reports. They're end of year programs, but the student is a member of the program, you want to report it. So the student's receiving basic targeted services. '25. The conditional field of validation is this education service code and academic year, right? For 122, these two fields are conditionally validated. If I try to post, it will tell me, right? Just like if I submit a file, if I try to make updates using online maintenance, the same validations. Membership start date required. Membership start date must not be empty. So I didn't put a membership start date. I thought I did. Oh, I did an end date. I'll get ahead of myself. Now let's try. School of attendance required. All right, now let's try. Now you see the other fields are required. So CalPads basically went down the list, looked at these fields before it even got to these. It didn't give me all of them at once. Sometimes that nuance, people feel like they're getting new errors and their data hasn't changed. It just didn't run all the validations at once, right? We didn't even pass go. Why am I running other validations? You can't even do this right. That's what CalPads is telling you. At least that's my translation of it. So we have a membership start date. I have to, for whatever reason, this isn't staying. And now service year is 2526. Service code, what Title 122 service? So these are the conditional fields of validation for 122. We should be able to post the record now. And that was a lot for some conditional fields of validation. All right, so I want to make sure I pass this off to Adriana within the next 15 minutes. So we'll get to our last part of the demo after we confirm that that program was added. So now you see 122. It's a participating program. So we will see this program at end of year on their reports. So even when you get to the point where you're looking at reports, you have to know what to look for. And we talk about that in the next training reporting certification, right? We talk about the reports, how to identify who's included and who's not. But and I got a plug for another training we did, right? If you want to know how to use the CalPads reports, I think in the basics we have a reports one as well. View all. Oh, there it was. It was already there. So reports, CalPads basics reports functionality. We go over the different report types, some key reports, and we cover the tools. So using the mapping guides is in this training. All right. So lastly, the last part of the demonstration, We submitted all our files successfully, all the records post. We're done, right? We can kick back, put our hands behind our head, eat some nachos. I'm thinking of happy hour. How many hours are we away? We're about 6 hours out, right? I'm thinking of having a good evening. I did what I needed to do. We're not there yet because we have to go to data discrepancy. So over here on the right navigation bar, this is still part of our submission process, right? We're not even ready to look at our certification status yet. We're not ready to look at our reports yet. We want to go to our data discrepancies. So again, I have to filter because I'm using the state account. It will just default. And this is what it looks like. I don't have any, right? I'm so good at what I do, I don't have any data discrepancy. That's not how it works. You have to click apply filters. You can even, and you want to, it's going to default on fall 1. But in fall 2, you need to select fall 2. Right? You see the different end of years. But we're looking at fall 1, 25, 26. And we'll click apply filters. So from all the data that we submitted, these are the errors we have. And there are errors telling us that we didn't submit data. So the SENR 0643F1 error, we have 19 of these. It tells us that we have students enrolled, but the English language acquisition status was not reported, right? So the reference record is different than the file type, right? The English language acquisition status is submitted in the CELA file. So if this file, if the reference record type and the file type to submit the data were the same, we could simply request an extract, populate the records, and submit it. And when I troubleshoot, that's how I try to help you guys sometimes because I can mass do it here. In this instance, right, there's 19 of these guys. You want to submit a new file for these students, right? So you're going to identify these records, submit changes for every one of these SSID in your student information system. You're going to, okay, this student's missing a student English language acquisition. How do I verify that? I open this tab. I only do that because I want to come back to this screen. I see the student's record in CALPADS, student English language acquisition. There's no record, right? I go back into my student information system. I verify the student has a record. If they don't, I create it. I find out what their English language acquisition status is, update that in my student information system. Then I go to the next kid on the list. And I populate for each of these students, either I'm verifying they have a student English language acquisition status or I'm populating it when it's missing. And then I'm going to submit that file to resolve these errors. Now, you can also add the status in CalPads. So here's the record. We can add the status. For whatever reason, we missed it, student. Oh, this is a student who is enrolled. Well, this looks like some kind of erroneous record, right? The enrollment start date was from previous year. So this student has a lot of problems. I don't want to actually work on this record. Let me find some test data that's not crazy. Okay, this student was enrolled this year, so I'm not scared of it. Add a new record. I'm not verifying anything because these are all fictitious students. You can't be as casual as I am, but right. So I'm gonna post this record, and we're looking at 297,303, right? So when we go back here, 297,303, we look at the DD, it's still here. Once the record posts, however, it should not be there anymore. Let's hit F5. So now the record posted. We come here, we still see it. So when I say it should not be there, it's not going to come off yet, but it should say something went wrong. To me, having done this, this is an indication that my recent update has corrected the error because CALPADS cannot find the record triggering this error anymore. This will be removed when you see the data discrepancies update, right? It's 11:21 now, so it hasn't run in 7 minutes, so it hasn't captured this change yet. But I know that it's corrected because CalPads cannot find the data that triggered the error. And that just comes from practice and experience, but you don't need that because we're sharing that with you now. So if you're resolving DDs, that's part of the functionality right there, right? Then a common error that you're going to see, it says SENR, right? Student enrollment 0606F1, missing plan record for enrolled, eligible, and participating student. This error triggers for almost every district, and there's a lot of them, right? And so even though we don't submit data for students with disabilities, you should be familiar with this because this can railroad your certification. This error is telling your district you have a student with disabilities enrolled and they do not have an active plan. They are not receiving services as far as CalPADS can tell. So what should you do as a LEA data coordinator? You want to make sure that your SEDS person, whoever submitting special education data, has access to data discrepancies and that they're logging in and they are aware they need to look for the names with plan records, meet records, statuses, or if it says students with disability. Don't be fooled because the reference record is SNR. It's the reason why it's SNR is just telling you this student is enrolled. And because this student is enrolled and they have these characteristics, they need an active plan or a status change. So it's not just looking at your enrollment record, although that's the reference record. It's looking at that student status. So we'll right click. And so we see the students enrolled, right? As of 9/22. And I'm going to come down to students with disability status. Because this student is eligible and participating and enrolled in your district, they need a plan, right? The previous district, Elk Grove Unified, identified, tested, provided services to the student. They were eligible and participating. They've transferred to your district. These students need a plan. So, I'm not a special education expert, but traditionally, you're going to adopt the IEP. So your special education data coordinator needs to submit a plan and the services to show record of that adoption for your district, right? So CSIS Berkeley should have a plan record and services, and it should probably be on the student's enrollment date. They're entitled to services the day they enroll. Then they have to hold a test, right? From before a year, the tests are annually required. When students first transfer in, typically they're a lot sooner. You're going to evaluate the student, you're going to test them and prescribe your own services. But that student needs to have a plan record before census day. So this student enrolled on 9/22, between 9/22 and 10/1, you have to adopt the IEP. And so to show that, you have to have your own plan record associated to CSIS Berkeley. So that's an error that you have to communicate with. Certainly, unless you're submitting data for your students with disabilities in addition to the student information system, you wouldn't be the one resolving this error, but it will railroad your certification. It's something that if you are the LEA admin and you're giving your SEDS data coordinator restricted access, you might want to give them a little bit more liberty to move in CalPad so that they are not impaired, right? There any other we want to talk about? Well, SNER, SNER. So we resolved them sometimes. So we'll use this one just to show the extract functionality. So, I'm not all that familiar with SWDS 0714F1, so I'm not going to make an honest effort of resolving these, but it says special education effective start date is less than the student's birth date. The reason why I selected these errors, though, is the SWDS is the reference file type, and it's telling us the effective start date is less than the status effective start date. So the status effective start date must did not filter for CSIS Berkeley. So we'll be very careful about this. But the status effective start date is less than the student's birthday. So the start date is probably incorrect, right? So when the reference record type is the same as the file where you're going to submit the information, you can use a discrepancy extract and make that correction rather than just identification. You can always get a list of SSIDs. So I want to make sure that the record type matches, right? We have the error code, but want to make sure that the record type is status. And we're going to extract this. You go to extracts again. I'll open a new tab, although I don't know that we're coming back there. Berkeley, hopefully it comes quickly. It did, right? And so we'll download this. And this is what the extract looks like. Remember, it was a status. So if I want to look at the data in this extract, well, it's two things. Yeah, I would recommend going to the batch file templates, finding the correct template. So it's status. And the one thing about the extracts is they're formatted in the same as the files. So here's the students with disability extract. And if I want to import the template, right? We've done this demonstration a million times. It's consistent. Here's my extract for DDs. It's DD extract SWDS, right? We're going to import it. There are headers in this file, but I'll just delete them later. It's not significant that I identify it because my template has headers. Yep. In the right cell, A2, you can overwrite any existing data. You see there was 3 filled. So we've extracted our errors. These are the student records triggering the error. And this information here, the run date, the error message, the error code, are relevant to the error, right? This is the error code, the name, and the run date. The rest of this are information to the field, right? These are records from L to A are records. So one thing about the DD extracts, you just make minor changes. You can resubmit this data to make changes, right? First, you would change the record type from dash whatever to SWDS, right? That's a valid record type. Then these fields related to the error, we don't need them. So you can just delete these. Sometimes you want to also remove the formatting, make sure there's nothing in there. And then you would populate the data missing. So this is missing the academic year. Like I said, I'm not really trying to resolve these errors, but you would resolve the error in the record, whatever it was. The initial entry date was the problem. You'd make the correct entry date so it doesn't conflict with the birth date. And you could submit this right back into CalPads. You could, save and submit it right back. So sometimes using the extracts is an efficient way to make mass changes without going in your student information system. I would only use it as an alternative. I would always recommend that you make corrections in your student information system, extract that file from your student information system, submit it to CalPads because you want CalPads to mirror what's in your student information system. You don't want a discrepancy between what you see in CalPads and what you have in your student information system. And that also might require you to reach out to your vendors for support, right? We'll help you with CalPads, but you have to make those translations into your student information system. But also another resource is join the CSIS listserv because there's someone else, probably hundreds of people who have your same student information system and can help you, right? They can tell you what field needs to be changed to make the data go into CalPads. Sometimes translating the fields is difficult. So I would recommend that. But unless there's questions, which I don't see any, and so I want to thank you guys, Adriana, Kyron, Marshall. I don't like answering questions on the fly. I like to cheat with all my resources so I appear smart. You can take us home.
All right. Thank you, Nate.